So I just prepared a little bit. So I just like to introduce Paul. As you are an asset risk and process safety engineer.
Yeah.
You started off as a commissioning engineer with GE in the 90s.
Yep.
Yeah. Working with various engineering disciplines.
Yeah, primarily.
Primarily?
Power management systems on ships.
Of which the last 14 years and counting for E.On.
Yeah.
Okay. So he knows what he's talking about. Yeah. You're not going to do this on your own, but assisted by Jasper.
Yeah, we're a double act.
Definitely. I'll also be a little bit on that side of the room because I have to press the button.
The clicker's not
The clicker's not wrong. I've got a spare clicker.
Yeah, we have a clicker, but there's no spare USB
Oh,
slot
nice.
to have the button.
So Jasper, I also have some friendly words for you. Your signature says barrier management psychologist.
Yes.
This is nice. You have experience in various fields and regions, including mining, wind, energy, transport, ranging from Asia to Canada.
That's right. I think so. Yeah. Well,
And still, he hasn't been 40 yet.
No.
So, what's there to come even? Have fun there, guys.
thanks.
You need this
Thank
one?
you. No, I'm fine. I think everybody can hear me, can't they? I don't normally talk quietly. Nice to see you all. I've not met most of you actually, and we've done several sorts of bowtie server forums around. But I'll jump straight into the presentation. I thought I was going to be doing this on my own laptop, so my own speaker notes are out the window and I'm winging this now. But we had a requirement, well, let's jump straight into the next slide, please, Jasper. So, we'll give you a brief introduction of who we are, myself and Jasper, what E.On is, what the organisation does and how we approach risk management, why we decided we needed a plug-out, and then the aim of the plug-out, what's going to do for us. And that Jasper will take over with how the plug-out actually works. It's still a work in progress at the moment, but I'd say it's over 90% complete. We're nearly there. It's functional, it's just not the finished polished product yet. And this again was for using the other API to talk to the database to read and write information backwards and forwards. And apologies for hogging all the questions with the previous session, but I am so keen to start using the API for some of our users to just read information from, but one of the key ones for me is all the revision info and all the bowtie quality information, as I call it, the metadata for that, so that I can see at a glance, yeah, new bowtie has been created, it's not got any of this information, I don't know who the author is, etc. So we can start assigning that. Because there's always more to do. It's not just about being risk in my environment, it's about compliance and governance as well. Oh, you left it in there.
It's not updated yet.
I mentioned that in one of my previous roles, my kids took a picture of me, and like how they do with all the face morphing stuff. I wondered what you were all smiling at first. So, well, that can be the IT geek we've used for testing. As Dan introduced me, I started off my work with GEC as a commissioning engineer, and I moved into design for power management systems for ships and dynamic positioning systems. Moved into Siemens, doing automation and control of large warehouses, so the likes of it nowadays would be Amazon. But anybody who's bought any clothes from Next, chances are it's come through some of my control somewhere. Now I've moved into E.On, I'm in the asset risk team, working with bowties. I've got another application that I administer across the whole of the UK, Focal for management of change. I'm not plugging it, but it's a fantastic application, just like bowtie is for what it provides for how you can manage your risks. Vocal's the same from a management change perspective. I'll just hand over to.
Right. I'll handle the clicker because I think it works now. So.
I think it works now.
Thanks to Taylor for the USB hub.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. So, E.On as an organisation, we operate across most of Europe. We've got 51 million customers. I'm not going to dwell on that because my sole focus is here, the UK, not even Northern Ireland. It used to be a tool for us across the whole of Europe when we were one big happy E.On, but then we split into E.On and Uniper, and the large generating assets went to Uniper. I was left with about 11 small CHPs in the UK. I say 6 because we've just reduced. We never seem to get more, we just shrink away. But as this presentation will show, we've morphed into be more of a project management type company. And we do products, so SRC pumps, solar panels, things like that. And this is where the idea for this plug out comes from, which I'll explain as we go along. So in the UK, we provide products for homes, for businesses, for cities. I'm not going to read them all out verbatim, but yeah, I forgot to mention battery storage. So we're developing bow ties for battery storage. We started off originally with creating solar bow ties, but you've got a battery with it, you've got an inverter, etc. And there's always different ways, and I'm sure you're all doing it differently as well, but do you create a single bow tie, or do you create a bow tie that's your solar panel with your battery storage, etc.? I mean, we even do things like insulation, air conditioning. We've got our on-site generation. Our big area that we're already in is district heating, but we're also looking, we're trying to win some of these huge projects that are happening in the UK with electrification of cities. We just lost one recently, which is unfortunate, and we're trying to win those kind of projects as well. Please tell me if I'm talking too fast, because I generally do when I start presenting. But E.on's approach to risk management, and you'll have seen this on Wolters Kluwer's website, they use the same approach. It's basically the 3 questions. And I quite like these 3 questions, because when we said it was just for process safety when it was first rolled out, it isn't really, it's for risk management of anything in general. Because if you don't know what can go wrong, well then you can't put systems and processes in place to prevent it going wrong. And if you don't have assurances in place, all your checks and balances, whether that's audits, KPIs and dashboards, as we were talking about earlier, well, you won't know your processes are working, so that you don't know people are doing what they say they're doing. So, you can't read these slides, but I just wanted to show you bits of information from our pack, like what is product and process safety, as we call it. We tweaked it slightly within E.on, because as the main people we talk to are not the larger generation sites where you've got, you know, a steam turbine, a gas turbine, a large generator. It can be about our solar panels, our heat pumps, even EV chargers. So we tweaked how we do it, and mentioning as well that process safety for us is not just about release of hazardous materials. A lot of it for us is about energy. Skip over that. The leading and lagging indicators ties in nicely with what we were talking about this morning for the API, and we've got 4 simple ones actually, and they're exactly the same for the lagging side as well. We have hazard studies, management of change, risk analysis and incident investigation. So what are we doing proactively? They're our leading indicators side. And we made our lagging indicators really simple in that we have another database, Prisma Incident, for our incident tool. And we have categories where each of these can drop into. So if we have an incident that is related to any of those categories, we can then dashboard against that. And then this is where I see, I'm trying to link my presentation in with the last one. If we had a dashboard linking bow tie, where our barriers sit for our controls, which could link to our management system to show you the actual control, link to our maintenance system to show the actual maintenance that was missed, and link to our Prisma system to show the incident, you can put all the information together. And I've long been an advocate of what Bob suggested, that yeah, don't try and create me any more reports. Let me have access to the data in the database. So one of our key challenges was E.on IT wouldn't let me have that access. We're now cloud hosted by Wolters Kluwer's, so that me getting that access in future is going to be so much easier. That's something I'm sure you'll all have your own local IT challenges. The IRIS process. The IRIS process is the independent review of integrity and safety. It's not used for our generation assets. This is what we use for our products, our SRC pumps. It is I like to say, a relatively good process. No, an extremely good process. My colleague Jess developed it, and it's basically just about the hazard identification, creating a bow tie, and coming up with a risk assessment. And I can't remember who asked me the question earlier, but why are we doing it? Because it's semi-LOPA, but we don't get on LOPA on being LOPA purists. What we're really trying to do is we've got a product. They're supposed to do their design reviews, their product reviews. Nobody really does. This is the tool to make it visual for us. So before they've implemented the controls, it might appear in the red, and all we're trying to do is show them that, right, now we've gone through the bow tie, you've answered all these survey questions, you've got a load of actions. If you address those actions, you'll be down here in the yellow, the LOPA band, or hopefully better still, in the broadly acceptable green region. Bear in mind, you've got to tailor that to your own risk appetite within your own business. And that's what we're trying to get from this plug out. Because at the moment, if I'm honest, my colleague Jess, who's been doing this, he's done it for a few years now. He's a dab hand at having several versions of bow tie open at the same time, Word, copying and pasting from different areas. I haven't tried to do one manually. Our boss did, Ian. Fell apart disastrously, so that was the whole point of let's get a plug out, because then you just got to press a button, pulls all the information out of bow tie, squirts you a Word report back, which, yeah, there's a few words that you've got to put around it, but at least everything's, you know the data's going to be correct, it's all in the same format, every report for every different business unit we do will be the same. So I've explained a lot about why we need for a plug out, what I've already just been talking about. Getting that consistency is vital to us. It's one thing we're sticklers on. It's all right having the information, but if we give every different team a different report, it makes it harder for them to understand. We also wanted, you know, this is a pilot project for us. We want to understand what we can do with an API, and that's where we then looked around to see who could do the development. Well, I spoke to Bob first, and then put me in touch with the Resilium guys, which I know from their previous lives working in CGE. It's a bit of flow chart there. So this flow chart explains what Jess had to do, my colleague, manually getting different bits of information from different parts of the system. But we tried to work this up as a package for Resilium to be able to deliver. Because whilst it's been a lot of, yeah, let's have a weekly chat to tweak this, tweak that, we've got to give them some sort of product scope for what they can design for us. And basically all it's doing is, from the local PFDs that are defined within bow tie, we've got a matrix now that you can tweak those values depending on the answer response that you've selected from the survey, so that we're using that to influence what the overall risk score. So if I went back to that risk rank matrix we had, where the red, you can see that by tweaking that, we come down here based on your answers in your report. What we actually find a lot of the time is, well, everything's still red because you're not doing anything. You're not doing many things that you should be doing, so until you've done your actions, you're not going to get your product into the alarm region. And we're not talking really about, for a lot of our products, that they're as inherently unsafe, let's say, as a gas turbine, a steam turbine. You're only talking about a solar panel, a battery, but they've forgotten a lot of obvious things. And it's not the individual harm that one product can do, it's the fact that if we've sold tens of thousands of these, that's a huge problem for us. One of our prime examples for that was a power supply unit for, you know, your in-home display. It was no good. We couldn't even trace who had we sold all these to, so we had to recall, it was about 1 million of them. That costs you a fortune. You've instantly, all your profit for all that you've sold, you've lost because you've recalled 1 million of them. How the plug out works. So yeah, I'm sure those of you that filmed early with XP will understand how you get your survey responses on there. It goes through a calculation matrix, squirts it out with new, current and future PFD values on there. At its simplest. Bear in mind, we tweak these based on our tolerability criteria, which you'll all have your own. I think we're pretty close to hand it over to you now, Jasper. But like you can see from this, the way it's set up is you have all your different barrier types, and I could show you ours because now I've merged everybody's design barriers, bow ties in their own format. We do have server, but if you let your teams loose just on BowTieXP, you will get something totally different back. So that's a good lesson for you all. Try and get everybody using server so that you're starting from the same lookup tables. Jasper's kindly configured it so that you can have as many different answer response options. So let's say we've got absent, present, and present monitored. We've really simplified it down now so that you can only select one of 3 answer categories. Before we had, oh, it's quite poor, oh, it's better than average. Yeah, really focus your user on fall off the fence, fall one side of is it good or bad.
Yeah.
I think this is where I hand over to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe quickly on this this slide as well. So what the main purpose of the reason why we wanted the plug out of the report is that you would have your bowtie on a particular product or like a risk within that product that the control or that the barrier would have a barrier type associated with it. So this would be a procedural barrier, for example, and it could be the hardware barrier. There are various options. And each of those barriers would have a list of questions associated with them. So it could be either directly linked to the barrier or it could be linked to an activity associated with the barrier sort of here to collect. You may or may not know if you're using both audit.xp from Enable or from Volkswagen basically. You can represent the answer values that people give to your questions. So each number here is an individual question. Every bar chart represents the cumulative answers on those questions. So apparently, well, this is just, I think, one answer value in this case, but you can imagine that maybe multiple people will be answering these questions over a period of time. And it is seen as a sort of a dimension of +1 to -1. Everything that's in the minus zone would be gradually more red. So if it's -1 fully red, -0.5 would be halfway red. If it's 0, you would not see any bar show up. So in this case, it's basically 50% green. And it does so for the other questions as well. You would be able to aggregate those results. Those would then be put into this risk matrix where we'll basically map the answer values that we got from the audit responses onto the barrier type. And the combination of these two values would then result in an actual current probability of failure on the math. So this is sort of uses the LOPA philosophy. So a probability of failure on the math means basically if we need this barrier, if it's activated at some point, this is the likelihood that it will fail, not do its job properly. So generally speaking, the lower your PFD value, the better your barrier is because it's less likely to fail in case of need. We have two values here, current and future. Current is basically what is being calculated, so based on our audit results and the barrier type, we consider this barrier to currently have a PFD of 0.2, let's say. And the future is the maximum possible PFD that you could get for this type of control. So the minimum, yeah, exactly, sorry, yeah, you're right. Yeah. The minimum, of course. So the strongest it can be given the fact that that it is a procedural barrier, let's say. So maybe a hardware barrier would have a lower minimum, basically, that it can achieve. If there's a discrepancy between these two, it basically means that the business might have some work to do. They can still do actions to improve it to that right level. Right? So it was basically up to the plugout to pull in the information about the barriers, pull in the information about the questions and the answers related to that, as well as the barrier type. Put it all into a configurable matrix, because E.on, of course, would like the flexibility to adjust the numbers as learnings come in. So maybe tweak a little bit, like maybe this score should not result in a 0.2 score, but actually in a 0.15 or something like this. Or yeah, you want to be able to configure that.
Yeah. And for different product types as well.
Yes, yeah.
It'll have different barriers. It'll have different protective barriers. The human element of it might be the same, but the protection device itself is going to be different for a solar panel as it is for a SOC.
Yeah. So you've got all, basically it's a way of calculating based on your audit answers what the effectiveness or the PFD rating of your barrier is given a certain module. And the matrix looks like this, or like in a similar-ish form, I would say. So on top here you have the audit answer values that you would get. So those range from, in this case, -1 to +1, and there would be several buckets. So if it would be, your score would be, your calculated score is 0.24, then you would fall into probably this bucket somewhere, or how many buckets you create, you can completely decide on your own. And well, in this case, it's roughly, I think, correlated to, let's say, this is very effective, this is very poor, yeah, sort of thing. And then in the rows, you would have the different barrier types. So let's say you have a behavioral or an active human barrier, let's say. Even if you have all the most positive answer values selected for it, you would probably end up in the 0.01 range of a PFD score, for example. Whereas if you did not have such a good score on your audit, then you would well, go further left into the table, basically. So it might be only a poor one, which gives you a 0.75.
To be fair, where we have most of our discussion is not around hardware and active elements, it's around people and procedure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the same in all the businesses where you've got your highly competent, highly trained people, like our operators on our generation plants who are assessed against standards. And then we've got other business units where, yeah, just get Joe Blogg's plumber in off the street, yeah, he's now one of our commissioning guys, let him loose. And it's, oh, hang on, we're not going to give you the same credit rating for just how robust and thorough and how much rigour you put into the process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is what these two rows are for down here.
Right. And that's basically an Excel sheet. And what we've created is a little website, basically, that runs on the server.
That's a good point, because one thing I wanted to do with challenges of E.on IT, and we're hosted by Walters Kluwers, we wanted this plug-out to work without me having to ask Walters Kluwers to upload any code or do anything anytime we want any changes. And I'm sure you all have the same IT problems as I do. Raise your ticket, wait 10 days for somebody to get back to you. I wanted more flexibility and a much quicker response than that. And that's where we approached Resilium and designed it all currently in your own server for us to link to at some point in the future.
Yeah, we completely circumvented the E.on
Yep.
anyway. So, but it makes it a lot more flexible to work with, and much more quick to make changes and stuff like that. So the output of the whole plug out is basically a Word report. And since it's a Word report, obviously you can style it any way you want. So you can have your logos on it, of course, maybe a table of contents. And generally how it works, there would be several tables in there, let's say, and how it works if we put a certain code, let's say, like a bit of text somewhere in the document, the plugout will look for that particular piece of code and replace it with, well, whatever table we have created based on the data that's in there. So you replace these values. So you still have the flexibility of maybe moving the place where the table comes in around, for example, or maybe change the headers of the document.
And one thing we've learned from doing this exercise is, yes, you can pull tables in, but in Jess's way of doing it, it was cutting and pasting images from separate reports. So what we have at the end is the appendix, and we literally just reference that report. We're still unsure whether we are going to embed them, because if you've got the table, to be honest, nobody really reads the first 4 pages. They might have a quick look at the risk assessment. They jump to the conclusions. Where am I? Which is basically this table. Is the target met or not? Yes, no. And this is why I was asking so many questions earlier about the API, because I'd like to link this to show our products, to then link it to the actions which would be assigned in bowtie to then say, target met, yes, no. Well, have you completed your actions yet? When they have, that's the cue then to go back into it, update this, and
you get the new score.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the nice thing, of course, being a custom sort of plug out is you can completely design it the way you want to. So for example, in this case, we wanted to have only the improvable scenario. So only the scenarios should be included in the report that actually had a future PFD which was different from the current PFD. So there was still room for improvement, let's say. All the stuff that's already at maximum effectiveness or peak effectiveness, we could basically leave out of the report. That's generally something that's difficult to do with the standard reports, I think, within BowTieXP. But in a custom report, obviously, we're completely free to filter that information and format it in a certain way. Yeah. Very good. Maybe we'll actually show the plug out in action in a way, at least as far as it goes at the moment, because it's not it's still work in progress. Keep in mind.
Yeah.
basically what the plugout does is it creates this very beautiful but sparse website. In the first button here, you can upload a configuration matrix. So basically it takes in an Excel sheet where you have created that configuration. So like if it's a score of 0.65, then it should be this value. I can show you perhaps what it looks like.
So that basically was just a spreadsheet, which we've got a slide for to just show you. Here's all the barriers. Here's the answer responses. What's your details for that?
Yeah, there it is. So the nice thing is by uploading it, you can have multiple matrices. So for example, as Paul said, it might be different products that have different matrix layouts suitable to them. That would work. In our case, we're testing it a lot on our BowTie server instance to avoid screwing up all the beautiful data that Paul has accrued. So in order to match our data, we also need to have a matrix of our own. And it should look.
Yeah, so for us, we'll have a matrix, one for air source heat pumps, one for ground source heat pumps, one for solar panels, so that we don't have to keep editing that matrix every time we want to run the tool.
Yeah. So here would be the overview of all the, as a row is basically you have all the various types. Then on top you have the bins, which is basically the brackets within which a score must fall in order to calculate the value. And then in the individual cells you'll have the resulting PME score that comes out.
And the beauty of this, the way Resilium have coded it for us, whether you've got currently, as we've got 3 bins, 0 to 2, or 5 bins as we originally proposed it, it works in any format.
Yeah, we can work anyway. And then we can even automatically associate a color code, for example, with that as well. So if it falls within like a bin 3, then we can say that the effectiveness score should be good or very good, depending on how you set it up.
So that has to match with the lookup table then?
That's exactly. So it has to match up with what you have in the lookup table. So that's why you probably will end up having maybe multiple matrices for different servers, for example, or different. So that beautiful matrix, you can stick it into the browse slot in here. So you would browse to where it is and upload it. Then it will query the BowTie server. So this uses the API as well, of course, and this will basically look at the content of your BowTie server, and it will look at your audit fill-outs. So basically it will check what kind of audits do you have in your server, and it presents you with an overview of this. This is our server, so it's a bit well, sparsely populated again. But you can see we have a road safety audit within, we have a particular audit setup, and then there's a particular fill out that Dan did a few months ago, I think. This is basically indicating that we want to use this particular audit to base the calculations on. So you can select one, or you can do that. And then you click submit. This is the moment of truth, of course. So actually here in the, maybe you can see it, you see that there's this color-coded line is moving up. This basically means that it's now pulling the data from the BowTie server as it goes along. It will have to get into questions as well. And at some point it will return a result.
Still building the report.
It's still building the report. So it's now building the report and outputting it.
Yeah. And as Jasper mentioned earlier on, for those that missed it, our first suite of bowties that we did for the generation fleet, all questions are attached to barriers. In our product way of doing it, and for our compliance frameworks, all questions are attached to activities. And so it was just hard-coded to work one way at first, but now it's coded so that it works in both formats, so it should suit any application for anybody else that is required.
And then the most beautiful screen is the plugout. A unformatted done in the corner, basically showing that we have succeeded. As you can see, this is work in progress.
Where do I buy
The
that?
final
That's
screen is
amazing.
That's it. Thanks, guys.
And then in this case it will output into a folder which I have designated, but normally you would actually get a pop-up where you can save the calculated document. onto like downloading a file from any website basically. You put it on your computer, and it will well take a format like this. So these are maybe Paul.
Yeah, this is just generic information that we've got explaining what the background to why we've done an IRIS report for, well, an independent review of integrity and safety for a particular product division. Then the scope is, obviously that's got to be a free text box, because it's, well, what is the product, who's your air source heat pump manufacturer? We don't necessarily manufacture these things, we buy them in from other manufacturers.
You can see already some data that's been imported, like so for example, this is basically the name of the audit that this report was based on, so that's basically updated basically from the server. And as you can see, it's formatted as a header, so all the kind of formatting stuff you can do. Also the header and footer is automatically generated based on that, and then eventually you get to the meat of it. So here you can see a beautiful tag. So it looks like this. Basically, it's a curly braces with a percent mark and then the name of the table that you want to go here. So in this case, it's the top event to consequence tables, which was a request for the report. This would be replaced with the actual table that would go in here. As you can see, there's no table, so this is still something that we're working on at the moment. A little bit further down the report, we do have this is an example of a table that has been automatically created based on the information. So you have your barrier, your current PFD, and a future PFD. As you can see, the current PFD in this case is 1, which is the worst score, so it's basically not providing any reduction at the moment. It could be a 0.01, but given the audit results that we received, yeah, there's still probably a lot of improvement in this case.
Yeah, and again, referring back to what Alistair mentioned first thing this morning, if I'm brutally honest, nobody cares. Nobody's interested in the detail, they just want to get to the bottom. What's your decision?
Yeah. So here again, there's already placeholders for the tables, but the tables are still under construction. And it will also provide you a list with missing information, for example. So in this case, for example, if there's no barrier type assigned to your control or your barrier, then you can't generate this value because you need that as an input. So it will provide you with a list of error messages in a way. So you can see, okay, this is the barrier that is missing a barrier type, so we need to go in and go ahead and fix that before we can run it again.
And that's probably a learning for us where we get increased consistency, and we know we've got a more robust report because we don't have that in the Manumatic approach. So this is something that automatically just comes out and you know straight away, oh yeah, better click back in there, I forgot to edit that value.
Yeah, but in the end, of course, like Paul says, like the conclusion table, I think is just the resistance of the whole thing.
Yeah. People just want to get to, well, what are we going to do about it? Jump down to the conclusion table and then show me the actions for what we're going to do to improve that product.
Yeah. Right, so that's currently as far as the report is going on. Now, let's talk a little bit quickly about some of the things that we've learned as we moved about from this process.
So on this is what Paul took you through earlier for linking to the API for going to Power BI. This is the one for the API for this plugout. I'm assuming I'll need to add another one for doing like Paul was doing this morning. So there's another link to it. It's not just the one connection.
Right.
Yeah. We've already addressed most of the questions on it here actually. One of the things we did is let's get it working. Let's worry about formatting and style later. Let's just get the thing working, which it seems to do at the moment. The next real test for us is, right, let's use some of our E.on data. Point me to our UAT server. Because we have two servers. We have our production, as we call it, server, where the real live data is, and then we have a UAT version, so when we're testing new things, even upgrades when BowTie's upgraded, I've still got one server at version 10 and my UAT is at version 11 until we're ready to update that one.
Right. Yeah, and very quickly, like I think maybe how we proceeded with how we did the project in a way is we scheduled weekly.
Oh
yeah, no,
this is the old one, isn't it? 'Cause we
It
did
is,
update.
yeah.
Actually,
There is
I
a
forgot
newer
what-
version, but it's
yeah.
somewhere. It's not
I
here.
forgot what stateless means, so
Yeah.
Jasper explained it.
So the thing is that in order for to keep the data well separated, we as Resilium we didn't want to store any of E.on's data on our own machines. So basically we only want to keep the information on the servers of like bowtie server basically, and just pull in the data, make some calculation and return a document, but not store any of the data that's on the bowtie server. So that's in a way what we call stateless. That's also why we need to upload the risk matrix, for example, that you want to use in this plugout. Otherwise, we could have, for example, created a database with all kinds of matrices in there. We don't want to do that. You just provide the matrix you want to use. You keep your matrices in your own folder somewhere.
Yep.
And then if there's any change that needs to happen, you can just you can access it yourself rather than having to ask us that we need to update the code
Yeah, it makes it better for both of us, but we're not burdening Resilium just with, oh, we want to tweak a PFD value in the matrix.
Yeah.
It makes it more responsive for us that we can do it much more quickly.
Yeah, and I think like the way we went forward is we had bi-weekly update calls just to see like what the progress was, because there's bound to be things that you run into. Like you did a very good job at specifying what a report should look like, but even with such a good document in hand, it's still yeah, there will be things that you need to think about, or things that we misinterpreted or stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it was a nice back and forth in the process, and we're still in it. Luckily, we're near completion. In future versions, we expect also to have like a graphical representation. So currently it's just tables, but it would be nice if there might be some graphical elements to it as well, if we still decide that's needed, of course. But, so that's basically it, I believe.
We've talked a lot about Power BI
yeah.
dashboards with my you hogging up the whole questions for full session. That's the way we want to go. So like a report is just for one product. I eventually see us having a dashboard with all our products on, with the actions at the side, so that then we can go, oh yeah, we've still got questions. We need to go back and challenge them have they finished all their actions, for example. But yeah, I've forgotten what I've improved the user. Yeah, this is not directly related to the plugout itself, but everything we're trying to do with whatever tool it is, bowtie, using a plugout. An awful lot of our business units are non-technical people, let's say. They're not from the same level of competence and expertise as what you have on a large generation plan. So we're always trying to present information in a much simpler way, which again ties into Alice's presentation. How do you make it so that your senior manager can make a decision quickly based on the information?
Yeah. Do you send them to like a BowTieXP and then have them figure it out themselves? Obviously, that's not going to work. So I think like with these kind of plugouts, you can have all kinds of.
Absolutely. So let me just show them the matrix. Well, you're here well into the red, but if you do these actions that we've mentioned, and you'll be down here in the yellow, and if you do these other actions, you'll be down in the green. They can understand that. Okay, well, what's it going to cost me? Well, this to get to this stage, this to get to this one.
Yeah, and then you can make a concise decision.
Yeah. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I was thinking about the audience to which you present this report, and then thinking that if they always put into the last page, why don't you put the last page at the front?
Well, there is an executive summary, but it was
yeah.
blank. You could have seen, and that's where we'd summarise the key information.
Got it. Okay. It's like if that's all they're looking for, it's just where's the back of the page?
I was being a bit flippant, but we like to do a full report, but obviously a report has to follow a certain order.
Yeah. Okay.
But it can also always be tailored to your needs.
I like that a lot.
That was one of the reasons for asking it not to be specific, and as you call stateless, in that, yeah, just give it as in a generic tool, a Word document, that you can then edit.
Yes, well done. Yes, well done.
Thank you.
You time for a geeky question. Right, so if you throw away all the numbers there, even that barrier category, so that barrier effectiveness is a really powerful indicator. Forget the whole PFD thing. So to be able to generate the barrier effectiveness based on audit
Audits.
is really powerful. What strikes me is that you've basically got two elements to value. You've got effectiveness, which is how good it is, and you've got capability, which is how good it could be. So what you've got as future PFD is its capability.
Yeah, in a way, I would say so. At least maybe
Yeah, yeah.
speaking.
So it would be, and I realised from the way you presented it, what you're actually doing is you're writing into the effectiveness field on server. If you rebadged, for example, BRF codes to be capability, I presume you could write into that field,
Yeah.
and you could show basically two levels of effectiveness.
Right. Actually, I forgot to tell it, but to tell you that indeed, like the calculations that are being made here are also stored back into the server. So it's not only reading
Yeah.
data; it's actually also inputting, updating
Yeah,
data.
because what I think is really would be really smart is looking at the barrier register. You know, you could have like an effectiveness column and a capability column.
Right.
Because you know you can't put you can't see PFDs in the barrier register.
Right.
But even at the barrier register level, you wouldn't necessarily need to have the report. You could just do something with the barrier register.
Yeah, if people were inclined to open up BowTieXP and get to the barriers, but that's true, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good comment. And
Yeah.
Version 2.
Yeah, definitely. There's always stuff to do.
So does this actually rewrite, so if I run that report and there is a drop in my effectiveness in a barrier, does that rewrite that onto the bowtie?
Yes.
Or is that just a notification?
Rewrites
It rewrites it, yeah. So it saves. So besides outputting the report, it will also update the information in the server. At least that's how it's currently configured.
But you're only looking at audit information and not any sort of server information, or
At the moment, no. But there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to do that. I mean, we could build that information in. As
Yeah,
well.
I mean, that'd be your own configuration. We don't use Serve because we're having a separate incident. We've tried using the tools alongside each other, and you get bogged down in which tools should we be using for which incident. So
Yeah.
we just keep them all now in our system.
I mean, we could even pull in data from a completely different, like an SAP, let's say, for example.
I think you just swap out what they've done for CERT,
yeah.
because that's your dominant mechanism for making adjustment or annotating change. And
Yes, this is all custom scripts basically. We can make anything happen.
It was proof concept, but basically, like I said at the start, to make lives easier for the people completing the report so that we can take less time to do more.
Yeah.
But the knock-on benefits of it, an improving concept of using an API, reading and writing information back, creating a report from it, it's been a great learning experience as much as anything.
So to get to that report then in server, or sorry, we're still on version 10, so server for me. To get to that running API, is that still admin right access, or could a risk owner go in there and have this pushed in as a report requirement to press the button? I'm a risk owner, I want to know today.
Yeah, it could be set up like that. Depends a bit on how you
Yeah, we
configure
haven't
it.
put any permissions on it, have we?
No, we keep it as simple as possible at the moment.
So the simple interface that Jasper demoed, if I was to make that link available to everybody, not that we've got the link to our system yet, it would be available to
Yeah.
everybody.
Which
So
might
that's
not
why-
always be ideal, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it could be.
But
But
it's a good point. We really should restrict that to our key users. But as we've got only a few users that are actively engaged in the system at the moment,
Not too much.
it'd only be myself and my colleagues that are doing it.
It's kind of an addendum to server, isn't it? People who have to know where server lives and have to be given permission,
Yeah.
and you'd have to be shown where this is, and you could press the button and get the extra data that is in and out of server.
And you have to have the configuration matrix and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
of course, it can be done.
But I think the real trick is to know what you need.
Yeah, no, that's of course the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's also why we have these recurring sessions, because there's always new insights as you're doing this as well. Like, it's all nice and well to draw it all on paper from the beginning, but it's just a rough guideline of where you end up being, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I've sneaked onto the stage again, I cannot help it. We have a question first, maybe let's do the question.
Yeah, just a quick question. On this table here, you show the absent value, present, and monitor. How do you, I don't know what kind of audits for the middle, 0.5,
This is just to display what the matrix looked like, coming from your context with the generation suite of bow ties where you have yes, no, not applicable. It's the same kind of idea. You wouldn't believe how long we spent discussing what should be these heading names. And that's when Jess and I then decided, let's not have 5, let's just make it really obvious. Barriers present, you've got a basic, how you've answered the question, you've got a basic barrier. Well, whether it's poor or completely rubbish, you can only answer absent, and then we've got it's present and monitored. And by that I mean, if you're doing your maintenance on it, is your maintenance sustained? Do you audit it? Do you check people, etc.? So that you're doing above and beyond, and that it just exists, but nobody ever looks at it. But we just left these columns.
More than in your surveys, then you've got multiple answer fields.
Yes, yeah. And that's when I was saying about I'm trying to make the end user experience better. I've got a whole set of work packages to go through with that everybody who's designed the bow ties and their service, because they've just done them purely in XP, all the headings are different in all the different, and I'm like, oh great. And that's why we thought, well, what are we going to standardise on? So I'm doing that work in the background as well.
And this is a really key thing, because that simplification and just having it's either there or it's not there, or it's there and I can demonstrate it's being used, is something that people seem to miss, in my opinion. You go and people go, well, we've got 15 use states, whether the document's been approved and it's been reviewed within 6 months or the last 15 months, and you just go, but none of it matters. I either need to be able to demonstrate it's there and it's worked, it's there and we don't know, or we just don't have one. And I think really simplifying this is a massive power step, because only when you know what you're doing and you're not doing, can you focus on why are we not doing it, and then I can put a separate one out for the detail of that. But most people fail on the first pass because it's too damn hard. People can't interpret the answers and they default to one side or the other, which is going to please my manager. What can I get away with?
Need to wrap it up, I think?
Yeah.
Time for lunch?
Yeah, for closing words,
Oh,
just
sorry,
to tie this into what the guys are doing and why Paul and I discussed, maybe let's go for the plug-out scenario instead of a plug-in, because this is about barrier type, effectiveness, audit input. But the next customer, or the 100 previous customers, will say, no, for us it's not that, right? It's criticality combined with the organizational unit, fed by SEER data, and it doesn't need to be a PFD value, it needs to be a qualitative effectiveness value that impacts the risk matrix. Like, you can go crazy, and you do, right? As the wider industry. So to not be the bottleneck here as enable on bowtie suite with a team of developers that is limited, right? We scale as we grow, but we cannot scale rapidly enough to keep up with your requirements. We thought about what is a scalable model. Well, it is empowering technology partners to leverage scalable technology, API endpoints, where you can read, where you can write data. But whatever you do outside of our product, you can go as sophisticated as you like, and the guys are doing that. So just know that they're not just going cowboy with this. It's definitely supported by at least a product vision, and also supported by, if they miss out on an API endpoint, or there's some method that is missing, or there's some data missing, I'd gladly prioritize that on the roadmap.
I can vouch for that, because it's been a collaboration from the start, and that we knew what we wanted to do. We spoke to Bob, and I'm sure you're all familiar with plugins. Bob invented the term plugout, but it's really useful to distinguish this is not inside the system. And I believe that after you started coding it, you had to consult, because there was some field that needed changing in the API, and it was changed, and that
changed on the fly.
Yeah.
And the other alternative is we build plugins. We do it with the internal team, but we have 2,000 customers with all their own requirements, and we would become the funnel on which all your requirements would need to be pushed through. And I would tell you, yeah, you can have this, but you have to wait 3 years because my roadmap is full. Now I'm just saying, I'll build an API, it's scalable, right? All of you can call it, and you can build your own modules around it, or you can use a technology partner that I heavily endorse to work with you to build it. And now they're building up this knowledge of the data model, of the type of calculations, reusable components, so I think it's just a win for everybody.
Great.
My closing.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.